Hey there, this is Eric J. Olson, your host for this episode of the Managing Partners Podcast. In this podcast, we talk to America's top managing partners to find out what they're doing to run their firms, grow their firms, and most importantly, keep the cases flowing. And today I have with me from New Jersey, Drew Britcher. Hey, Drew.
Hey, Eric, how are you?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you making the time. Can you tell the audience a little bit more about you and your firm?
So I'm a New Jersey-based medical malpractice personal injury trial lawyer. I'm what they call in New Jersey parlance a certified civil trial lawyer, which just simply means I subjected myself to a review of credentials and a second bar exam and managed to pass it, and now put myself through a 5-year cycle of having to teach enough or listen to other people teach enough to keep that title, which allows in New Jersey an interesting thing from an ethical standpoint. We're allowed to actually pay referral fees to lawyers without them having to actually do any work on the file, which is very different in many other states. Our firm is a 6-lawyer personal injury and medical malpractice firm. We have 2 offices. One of them is in Glen Rock in Bergen County, relatively close to Manhattan, and the other one is in Morris County in Morristown, about a half an hour away. And we try cases and we handle cases and we try to do our best to help people who have had something really lousy happen to them be able to deal with the rest of their life.
Sure. So in this day and age, with a lot of people working remotely, how has that changed your office staffing? Do you have people actively working at each office?
For the point till now, it's almost been completely remote. When the pandemic hit, because we had done so many depositions via some platform like this, we immediately walked out on Friday, walked in on Monday. We're all of our employees and us on a Monday morning 2-week calendar review. We've continued to do that. Every Monday, 9 a.m., we're all on for an hour, and then we go off to do the rest of our work. And likewise, throughout the pandemic, to maintain connection with everybody, every week I was seeing to it that a case of wine was getting delivered to my office, and it was getting distributed amongst my people. And every Friday at 4:00, we would shut down an hour early and get on Zoom together and have a wine tasting and a discussion of how our week went. And that not only included us, it included our spouses or significant others in, those on a regular basis. And that really kind of, kept everybody connected. We have not changed our staffing over that. Everybody's remained employed. We haven't, added anybody. The vast majority of people worked fully remotely until things kind of calmed down a bit. Now everybody is expected in the office for some portion of the time. And we have one employee who can walk to our Glen Rock office. That is the person who came in through the whole pandemic every single day and opened the doors and collected the mail and saw to it that if something had to happen physically there, we were, able to do it. But now we're starting to have the discussion about what's the right balance. I think people have gotten used to being able to work from home. They've proven they can do it. But I think for the people who have, for reasons of their tasks, reasons they kind of needed to return to the office, it becomes a little bit isolated when, they're the only 1 or 2 or maybe 3, in the office. So we're having the conversation.
Yeah, for me, it was nice for a while until I decided it wasn't nice. It's kind of like I likened it to camping. You look forward to it, you do it for a couple of days, and then you're ready to go back to normal. And I went camping for about a year, basically in my house, working out of the house with all the distractions there, and I just couldn't take it any longer. So it didn't make any sense since my office is only about 15 minutes away from home. So sure. I was the first one back after about a year out, and now we've settled into a new norm. But most people are remote these days. just because we've been hiring from out of the area. But all sorts of different companies take different tactics on this issue. And I know a lot of lawyers that are working remotely and even out of state, maybe even out of the country. I've heard of that as well. And because they rarely have to show up in court. They can do everything electronic, which is really interesting.
It's kind of interesting because we're primarily a trial firm, and we have not had a trial in the last 2 years. We don't do the kind of smaller matters generally that can be tried fully remotely. A lot of our cases are the 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 week long, medically oriented cases that need to be done physically. And we just got our first case where a judge has said, August 1, you will go physically in the courthouse. But in New Jersey, the current circumstance is that they are still, even for the cases they are bringing into courthouses, picking the juries remotely and only bringing the chosen jurors into the courthouse for the trial.
Well, I would think that would make sense. That's a pretty good use of everyone's time, right? So, really interesting things that are changing with remote work and whatnot. So, let's shift a little bit. We're a digital marketing agency. We're always interested to know what's happening in digital marketing with various law firms across the country, and it's pretty interesting to me and to us that different firms take different tactics. So, I wanted to find out from you, as far as getting new cases, besides referrals, which is always big with law firms, but besides referrals, what are some different ways that you go about getting new clients?
Well, certainly, different people do different things. Our website, for example, is more of a reputation website than a marketing website, meaning in effect that I would tell you that I am truly of the belief that despite what the judge tells members of the jury, the very first thing they do when they get home at the end of the first day is they look me and my adversary and my clients, et cetera, up on the internet. And so the last thing I want is them coming to a website that is going to turn them off because it somehow reinforces their misimpression of what people who do what I do are about and what we're like. So we're probably a little more personal, a little more professional in some ways. For example, our firm does a lot of work in the charitable space. And so when you go to my website, tab number 2 isn't, verdicts and settlements, it's charitable works. And that's by design because we don't want people thinking that what I do is, quote unquote, all about the money, because it's not. It's completely about trying to help people who've had something really bad happen deal with the remainder of their life. And that's the nature of where we position ourselves. Now, does that mean we don't spend time and money with an SEO professional thinking about what words we need to be using and how those play? No, we do that. We do certainly try to use that as a mechanism.
I'm on your side now. I'm sharing it. If anyone's watching the video, you can see it. If you're just listening, obviously you won't be able to see it. But yeah, the third tab in charitable works. So when you click on that, that's really nice. I like that.
Yeah, it has sort of a historical background with the firm. We were in our second year of operation, and we were working on a case that involved a particular medical condition known as shoulder dystocia, which is a problem that can occur in childbirth when the baby's shoulder becomes hitched on a portion of the mother's anatomy. And as a result of that, you need to undertake certain maneuvers to see to it you don't cause a nerve injury to the child's arm. And we repeatedly had handled many of these. And so we started gathering every piece of literature that had ever been published on the subject, going back to like 1931, I think was the first piece. And we gathered and put it together, and we prepared ourselves, for a particular matter we had. And someone else in a national listserv asked if anybody had XYZ pieces of literature. And I wrote back and said, well, I have that, and I have all these others too. And they said, would you send me a copy? And I said, I'd be happy to. And the gentleman turned around and unsolicitedly sent me a check for $250. Turned around and had a light bulb moment. I said, well, maybe everybody else would like this. We can turn it into good. So I turned around and I said to everybody, I said, I'll tell you what, anybody else who wants one, $250, we'll have it made, we'll have it shipped to you, etc. And the money will all go to buying Christmas presents, for children in need in our area. And it was like
Nice.
that old, I think it was Xerox did the commercial where the people are like, they got their first order and they're excited, and they got their second order and they're excited. And then they get their 10th order and they're like, now what do we do?
Yeah.
So we left on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And in those days, we didn't really follow our email on the weekend to speak of. And I came back in on Monday morning, and it was kind of like that. We had exploded from, 4, 5, 6 requests. By the time it was done and over, we had nearly 100.
Wow.
And so in those days, again, because we weren't necessarily dropping everything onto disk, we weren't necessarily doing things on file share, et cetera, we literally took 3 binders to a printer who created 100 bound copies of this that we then shipped all around the country. And in fact, a couple outside the country, we actually had a lawyer as far away as Australia, get a copy. And so we then created a truly separate account within the firm called our Special Works account. And we started using it for that purpose. And then as time went on, we did the same thing with other literature. We updated that set of materials. We started putting them on discs and making them word searchable, and et cetera. And I do a certain amount of personal counsel work for doctors that I don't, take as an income. And I do a certain amount of expert witness work that I don't take as an income. And that money all goes in there, and we use it to support food pantries and battered women's shelters and youth shelters and cerebral palsy centers that are in our region. And we also do a little project called the Christmas shoes that we do every so often. We don't do that every year because it's a significant expenditure when we do it. Where I don't know if you've ever heard the song "The Christmas Shoes." It was popular a number of years ago. It generally brings a tear to almost anybody's eye who listens to it. It's a Christian band called New Song does a song that's based on a story of a little boy going into a store and trying to buy a pair of shoes for his mother who's dying for Christmas, and he doesn't have enough money. And so somebody behind him provides him the resource, and the child, of course, the world is made. And so we've gone out and identified people in our community through what we generally refer to as an angel. So the people who are benefiting from this, they don't know it's us. They have no idea whatsoever. It again kind of goes back to the old MASH episode where Winchester talks about, that true charity is done without recognition.
Yeah, I agree.
I like talking about it, but I also will tell you that when it comes to that one, it's that child doesn't need to know who it was that
That's right.
them
That's right.
and their parent on that trip.
I feel the same way when I give. It's not about me. It's about giving. So, yeah. Very nice. I would imagine it's well received in the community as well. And I certainly like the fact that you put that high and in the center of your website. That's really nice. On your marketing, so how are you handling that, and what is working well these days for you?
Well, we've always followed the multi-dimensional approach. Everything supports everything else. So even though I don't believe in Yellow Pages advertising, today, I still, because they haven't raised their rates in forever, and I have the back cover of the local phone books in my area, I still spend the money on it. Why? Because that one time a year when it drops on everybody's doorstep, they see the ad, and that then reinforces that we do some television, advertising, not a lot, and we do it differently. It's very focused on my partner being a physician, me being a certified civil trial attorney, as opposed to on, not to pick on my colleagues, but I'm offended when I see a commercial that says, "Call us, we'll get you money," because that's not what this is about.
Yeah.
And that then gets reinforced by things like the annual super lawyers thing, and et cetera. When people see the name and see the name and see the name and see the name, it reinforces enough that when something unfortunately happens, they think back to it. And so one leads to another, leads to another. I was hysterical. I was at a law firm last night. I'm the incoming president of the Alumni Association of my law school. And we had a New Jersey alumni networking event last night at one of the firms that routinely defends cases of mine. And I'm in their central lobby area of near where their conference rooms are. And they have a television that, runs the local news channel in the background. And so while I'm standing talking to these people, in the middle of the conversation, all of a sudden, there's my firm's advertisement on the screen. And we're all like stopping dead in our discussion because, we could have timed that any better for that moment. And we just find that repetition of recognition is out there. We do something good. We have a public relations person who sees to it that the little local newspapers, the town I live in, the town where my offices are, et cetera, my partner's town, et cetera, they're always looking for something. So you send them a press release, and they pretty much publish it, exactly as it was written. And in today's age, more and more, there's these local, I don't know what I want to call them. I guess I'd call them sort of local news sites, but they're kind of almost, because they send you, notification of anything that's new. They're almost like a version of the local Facebook, without anybody really posting on it, et cetera.
Sure.
I guess the other thing is, I still am. I'm a relationship builder. Tomorrow night I will be having a wine tasting for a series of people that are leaders in my community. Why? Because you want them to remember you're out there.
So a couple thoughts on what you said. First, I'm going to give you an award because you are the first person that I've come across that still advertises in the Yellow Pages. But if it works, right? So you're doing something that's different, right? So in my area, like I used to get the Yellow Pages dropped on my driveway years ago. That hasn't happened in, I don't even know how long, at least 5 years, probably more like 10 years. And for me, at least, it would drop, and then I would pick it up, and guess where it would go, right? So if you're going to do it, spend the money, right, to get the advertisement visible. Otherwise, you may only get one shot. It's kind of like a direct mail. But that, at least for me, like they don't do that anymore. So if in your area they're still doing that, then there's an opportunity there, which probably a lot of people have exited from, which means you've got it. It's probably a shrinking media, but it's there, and if you could take advantage of it, great. I believe the same thing even in. I'm a digital marketer, but I believe the same thing with direct mail, physical mail, and even in some cases, some niche. Either newspapers or magazines. They make a lot of sense. But that is interesting. I have not heard of someone in a long time talking about the Yellow Pages. So if it's still working for you, that's awesome. And then the second,
it only really works in that fashion that we just discussed.
Yeah.
I would never promote to anybody the idea of putting something inside the book.
Yeah, there you go. Because the chances of it getting opened are pretty slim. So the other concept was recognition versus recall of a name, right? So by doing all the things that you're doing, the PR, the charitable giving, as much as your name is associated with that, but basically being out in the community, that builds up name recognition. So when people see your name, they'll recognize it from the past exposure to the brand. Recall is a lot more difficult. Right? So like we have a personal injury lawyer out of South Carolina, and his philosophy is when it comes to the mass marketing, really put yourself out there, get attention, get people to know the name. And so they'll recognize the name when they see it, but they won't need you until a particular event happens, a car accident, really, right? Or something similar to that. In your case, it'd be like medical malpractice. And they're going to go to the source that people go to these days, which is Google. And they're going to do a search for car accident lawyer near me, or some variation of that, depending on their situation. And when they get the list, he wants his name to be recognized from all the other broad advertising and marketing that he's done. So he's a true believer, and I would agree that it's very, very difficult for people to recall the name from a blank piece of paper from nothing, but they'll recognize it when they see it in a list. And he's banking on the recognition, and it's doing well for him. Well, what are your thoughts on recall versus recognition?
Well, I think sometimes you get a benefit, coincidentally. My last name, for example, there are maybe 160 Britchers in the entire United States. In the state of New Jersey, where I practice, the only Britchers you'll find, are me, my daughter, who has been the director of operations for Rutgers Gymnastics, my son, who is a medical transport person down in Newark, my ex-wife, who still uses my last name, who used to be the director, the assistant director of the food pantry in the county. And that's it. There's a guy down in South Jersey someplace who's not related, who has my last name. So the good news for me is Britcher leading our name, was for other reasons, but, it works out well. I mean, as opposed to my partner, Armin Leone, here in New Jersey, there are plenty of Leone families, and it might stick, it might not stick. Arguably, if he were the first name, we'd be using a lion somehow because of the reinforcement. But you get lucky.
Well, I would say you are lucky with the last name because it's unique, as you say, but it's easy to spell and say. Usually, you have to sacrifice those two qualities for uniqueness, right? So.
Yeah, as long as you get them to the B part, you're good.
You're good.
Because there is a common family name, Pritchard, and I have had my problem with people, who've done that, but they get the B, the rest of it flows pretty easily.
Actually, speaking of names, how many people get tied up or confused by the E in front of Drew? Do they call you E?
No, they call me Drew. We talked about this last night in my law school thing, because the dean, when I went there, was E. Donald Shapiro. And part of why I ended up using E professionally was because at my law school, in my state where I went in New York, you had to use your first initial on everything. I was Drew my whole life. You go back to my high school stuff, my college, Drew.
Yeah.
But when I was forced to have to put the E on it, there came a point where, people made the comment that, it kind of created a distinction in some way, that you weren't searching for a middle initial type of thing. And then it was kind of also funny because that dean once said to me, "What does your E stand for?" And I said, "Edwin." And trust me, if I was called Edwin, it was because I knew I was in trouble and it was time to run. And he said, "Well, that's okay. Mine's Irvin. I think you've got the better end of the deal." And so it stuck, and became something that now I get friends who do the E instead of calling me Drew.
Well, I bet the combination of the initial and the first and last name, I guess it's really the middle name and the last name, makes for uniqueness.
Yes, it does.
Yes, which is very nice. I had to do something similar, which is when I injected the J in between Eric and Olson, because there's a whole lot of Eric Olsons running around, not only the United States, but around town. And so I had to try to get a little more unique, and that was where I injected the J. And there's a couple of us kicking around with the same spelling and everything, and my spelling is different than most would expect. But I think it is important to try to get unique in your name, whether it's your personal brand or your company name. Otherwise, it just becomes confusing and people don't really, they can't differentiate you from the other ones. So all right, we've talked about some things that you've done in marketing, things that are working well. Is there anything in your marketing or advertising that used to work well, but you recently stopped doing within the last year or two?
So it's funny you use the word stop, because I'd say the Yellow Pages doesn't work anymore either, but I haven't stopped doing it because I've got that, exterior cover type thing. Now, I would certainly tell you that I think that the what I'll call sub-listing stuff doesn't work very well. And I get a little frustrated by it too when the, again, like you take the super lawyers and they come to you and they say, we want you to spend money to be one of the, 5 people listed that we restrict the super lawyers to in this region or whatever. And I look at it as, okay, so it happens that my website's run by the same company that's doing that. They're basically asking me to give them money to outposition the website they're running for me. So for me, it was like, I'm just not going to do this. But I also don't think it works all that terribly well, because I think that people aren't going to the sub-sites. I think, people have become cognizant to some degree about the difference between paid advertising on the internet versus, real, I guess you think of it as more organic recognition that this is a firm that does what they say they do. And that's why I think that those, are kind of slowly dying off.
Yeah, we call them aggregator sites. They aggregate a bunch of data, and sometimes there's pay to play. The reality is they get clicks. They do have rankings if they do it well. So people will find those listings and they'll click through. But there's a lot more authority if you can get your own listing high in the basically the Google rankings, the organic rankings. And to your point about advertising versus non-advertising, when you do a Google search for something like medical malpractice lawyer, you're going to get at the very top of Google, you're going to see 3 or 4 ads front and center. That's all you see, right? You would think that they'd get a whole lot of clicks. Well, the reality is that only 3% of people click on those ads and the rest drop down. So they have to actually take some action, scroll to get down to the next section, which is the organic section of Google. So 97% of people scroll down there. Why is that? Well, I could probably make an educated guess that they trust those results more than the ones that are paid for above. So, and it's a much stronger conversion rate once people click through to the website from an organic result versus a paid result. More people will convert on the website after they've clicked through an organic listing. So they trust it more. It has high reputation, and people are also accustomed to the fact that those listings, Google only puts them up there if Google basically believes in them, and they have, everyone knows these days, I would say it's common knowledge that Google has a very robust algorithm, and you have to be one of the best to get to the top on the top of the first page, and not the as top. So there's authority that goes along with that, just because people have gotten to the first page and towards the top of the first page because people believe in Google. So that brand authority of Google goes to the organic listings as well. But yeah, 3% click on the ads and 97 drop down, take action to scroll to drop down. So I think your point is well taken.
Yeah, I think once upon a time it was different, but again, talk about things that evolve. I don't think I've clicked on anything in that, ad section myself. And I'm not talking about lawyers. I'm talking about anything I do, probably for the last 4 or 5 years, once I came to understand how the system worked. Yeah.
So for me personally, I will click on an ad if it's the perfect match, right? So it has to specifically address the problem that I'm searching for. If there's any vagueness to it, I won't, because I know the organic results will satisfy what I'm looking for.
Sure.
So, yeah. And by the way, we do advertising here, and we see results. But it takes an awful lot of work to make sure that specifically what's being searched for is what the ad says you'll get if you click on it. So it can't be broad. There has to be a lot of ads, a lot of variation of ads based on what the person's searching for. So cool. So earlier you said that you have 6 attorneys, and sounds like you've been at 6 for a while.
Yes.
Do you have growth plans at this point?
It would be fair to say that we're all to some level waiting to watch the pandemic come to its evolution conclusion, hopefully. And a lot of that has to do with, from our end, that courts in New Jersey are significantly backlogged. You want to get a better sense of what's the gap time between when we initiate a case and when we're going to finish a case. You tell me that it's going to take me 2 years from the time I initiate a case to the time I'm going to get a trial, and I know I can handle a particular number of cases. You tell me that it's going to take me 6 years to get the same case. Number one, I can certainly handle a whole lot more, and B, I can look at the investment not only of time and personnel, but to the expense. I mean, one of the big things in my field that's a little bit different than other areas of law, we don't get paid until it's over.
Yep.
I mean, my friends who do hourly rate work, they get paid when they do their work or not long thereafter. And 2, besides the risk aspect of it, is the fact that we are generally in a position where our clients cannot afford to advance the costs of their litigation, their disbursements. And that's a big issue. I mean, we have a huge amount of money for a firm our size on the street, as we refer to it, that are the disbursements of our clients' cases that the IRS says we can't deduct. And there's only so much of that when you're not paying a line of credit down you can borrow. And so that places its biggest constraint on what you can potentially do, even if you had the extra files. So at the current time, our hope is that we will continue to expand the personal injury side of what we're doing, increase the personnel of our Morristown office, which is our smaller office, over the next couple of years. And hopefully, get to a point where we start working towards that point of who's the next generation of me and Armand.
Yeah. Yep. Makes a lot of sense. Well, Drew, I really appreciate your time. We've actually gone way over. So thank you for accommodating me. No, hey, well, I was one that kept asking questions. I appreciate it. What is a good way for someone to reach out to you if they have questions?
Well, they can go to our website at medmalnj.com, or they can email me, drew@medmalnj.com, and be more than happy to answer any questions anybody has.
There you go. All right, everybody, reach out to Drew. His website address is on the screen. And again, it's medmalnj.com. And if you're looking for other episodes like this where we interview America's top managing partners, you can check out our backlog of over 200 interviews at arraylaw.com/podcast. Every one of those episodes is tagged by practice area and state, so you can find exactly what you're looking for. And if you're looking for digital marketing for your law firm, check out my firm, which is arraylaw.com. We specialize in websites, SEO, online advertising, and social media. All right, Drew, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being invited on.